So, talking about Apophaticism again, now just, less from a theoretical place and more from a how does it look in somebody that has it? What does it look like? And this will be a shorter video. I think I'll do two or three maybe on this subject. And I just thought I'd do one now, more of a quick one. But so we're talking about Apophaticism, which is this notion that you can arrive at God best not by positive affirmations about what God is, but by, even though those affirmations are true, even though they're accurate, we negate them. We set them aside and we say that because we don't know what these attributes are really like in their reality, because we don't know what these attributes are really like, then our ideas of those attributes become a kind of prison to the mind, and it makes the mind small. And so that's the first thing I wanted to say about Apophaticism, is that it's like so much of spirituality is the subjective experience, right? Just what is it like if I stop thinking and just notice my awareness, my consciousness? What is it like? And Apophaticism creates these feelings or these energies or these states of mind that are really helpful. And one of them is sort of a, so think now if you have mental constructs that you live with about God, but also a little bit about the world too, and about people also. I think Apophaticism, once you get it with God, it spreads to people and the world to some degree. And it allows us to walk around knowing that we don't know, that there's way, way, way more that we don't know than we do know. And that even when what we know is true, we don't know the whole truth. And even more so, the ideas we form around what we know can also tend to, they could be wrong. There could be chains of thinking, right? A is true, so then I think B is true. And if B is true, then C is true. And you think in these logical chains. And we do need to think like this. No one's saying don't think. But we also know that all of that is extremely limited, and it can become quite precarious the further out on the chain you go in your thinking about whatever, theology, spirituality, people. That's, kind of like judgments, right, about people, forming specific ideas about them when we don't really know that those things are accurate. And even if they're accurate, they're not accurate in the sense that we don't know the whole of that person. We don't know. We don't know their trajectory. We don't know where they came from to get where they are. We don't know where they are really, and we don't know where they're going. There's just so much we don't know. And so Apophaticism, if you get it with God, then it starts to kind of find its way into your experience with the world, and it allows a lot of unknowing. This is the word some of the mystics use, unknowing. My first spiritual teacher, Clyde, called it unlearning, although he had a little different, it wasn't really true Apophaticism, but still this unlearning. That what he told me is everything you know. This is Charlie. He's just bugging me, so I thought I'd give him a kiss. So, everything that you know, Clinton, he said, is not only... He said you don't know anything. And that was okay. I didn't like to hear that. I didn't want to hear I don't know anything. But as I got to know him better, and the further that I interacted with him over a period of time, he didn't even mean that I didn't know anything. He meant that everything I knew was wrong. And you can rest assured that everything you know is wrong. And if you have Apophaticism, that makes you feel peace. If you don't have Apophaticism, it makes you feel stress. And this is so two divergent paths now, right? So two people on their way on a spiritual journey. One realizes they don't have all the answers and feels stress about that, can feel anxiety about that, be very concerned about that or in a hurry about that and is constantly trying to fix it by filling it with information, right? Every new book that comes out, we're not anti-intellectual. We know that knowledge is a part of God, so we're certainly not negating knowledge. We're not anti-intellectual. However, there's another way to gain knowledge, and Apophaticism clears the way for that. So someone who doesn't have Apophaticism, they're trying to figure everything out. They're trying to understand everything. Every time God does something in them, they're always trying to figure it out. A little of that is okay. I mean, we have different personality types. So some people are more thoughtful about things. They're going to think more about what's happening in their relationship with God. That's fine. But so there's going to be more or less just in personality types. But every personality type needs to ratchet that down, not through force of the will necessarily, but by attaining a kind of intellectual humility and spiritual humility that comes from Apophaticism. Just say, look, it's not this. It's not my ideas. It's not my experiences. I don't know what's happening to me right now. I mean, I experience some things that are happening. But they can be the wind coming off the wind, coming off the wind of what God is doing in my soul. This is very often the case. This is why some people are observing God very closely, what they can see God is doing in their life over a period of a couple of months. Then as that plays out, it turns out that what God was really doing was something completely unnoticed by the person. And this other thing the person was really hyper-focused on either didn't happen, or if it did, may have just been the symptom of a deeper happening they couldn't see, that they couldn't see coming. So Apophaticism, it allows us not to get hyper-focused on this piece of information, that piece of information, that piece of information. And it also just generally speaking lets us know that information isn't really the way. Like, it isn't how you get in. It's not how you get in. So how does knowledge come? So if someone's on the path 15 years, they do seem to know more than someone who just got on the path. So why is that? If we're all being apophatic about it, why does the person 15 years into a regular meditative practice and a deep commitment to spirituality, why is that person, why do they know more than someone who just started if we're all being very apophatic? Well, it's exactly and precisely the apophaticism that allows for the knowledge to take place. And here's what I mean by that. So the soul quiets. The soul begins to trust. The soul begins to realize that salvation comes from Christ, right? It doesn't come from their mind. That salvation is entering their soul at a level that cannot be noticed or understood necessarily. That certainly cannot be fully noticed or understood. It is entering into the soul in a way that is in secret, as John of the Cross says. It's infused into the soul in secret. So the soul that has apophaticism just simply now trusts that. They just trust it. Say, okay, I'm not going to see this coming. And my seeing it coming is just not necessary. It isn't necessary. So then why am I looking so closely? Why am I looking so closely? Why am I trying so hard? Why don't I just take it easy? And the soul that has apophaticism just slows down. They just slow down and they mellow out and they begin to just experience a quiet in their life where they just are okay with not having all the answers. They're okay with that, with not having all the information. They're okay with unresolved problems, right? Because they've come to see by looking back that these problems get resolved. It does take a bit of time on the path for this to start setting in because you hear about it and it's language and you have to listen because you have to start quieting down and not trying to figure everything out. You have to do that sort of on faith at first, taking people's word for it that it matters. Taking people's word for it that it's important that you just mellow out and kind of knock it off. Just when I see new people on the path, what I think about them is I think they just need to calm down. in a fundamental way. Just calm down. Up when they're up, down when they're down, confused when they're confused, always spinning all the time. And they just don't have that perspective of a year or 2 years of like seeing a trajectory on a graph, you know. Sure, there's ups and downs all the way, sure, but where did it end compared to where you started? That's a big picture thing you can only see after a lot of time on the path. So people that have apophaticism, they gain their knowledge by looking back at what God has accomplished in them. Right? See what I mean? And sometimes that's a couple year journey. I mean, sometimes that's a 2-year happening. It could be a 3-month happening, a 4-month happening. There are some that I went through one. It took 8 years to see clearly what was it that God was doing. And then I think it took 13 years total, you know, another number of years after that, 8 years, to have a great perspective on what God had been doing through that whole time. I really did have to sort of walk blindly during that time and trust. And apophaticism makes that possible. Then when you get placed somewhere, when you are now somewhere different than where you were, you look back and see what God was doing, and you learn a lot about God from that. A lot. You start to understand the ways in which God works in your soul, the ways in which the Holy Spirit interacts with events that are happening in your life, and how they seem to work together to create these outcomes that you didn't even know about in order to ask for. And I think that's, you know, quite important to realize that where God is taking you really is not where you think you're going. One of the things I hear the most amongst people that have an opinion about where they're going to end up is that it doesn't unfold the way they thought. It doesn't look the way they thought it would look. They don't get what they thought they were going to get. They get what God is giving them, and they would not, most of them, would not have asked for what they have received. And I joke, you know, that the ego is the one asking, and it's asking for what will allow it to survive and thrive. That's what the ego wants. Like on the smorgasbord on the banquet, right? The rich banquet, right? That God throws, invites everyone to come in the scriptures, right? And there's this massive banquet, a feast, a great feast, right? With all this goodness. The ego walks into that feast and it wants every single thing on the menu that will allow it to survive and thrive. But there are a whole lot of items on the menu that will force the ego to die. It will never ask for those things. It will never be attracted to those things. Those things will never appeal to the ego. And so apophaticism sort of also just clears the way and say, I don't know the way. I don't know the way. I don't know the way. And I don't know what I need to get there. I don't have what I need to get there. I don't know what I need. And apophaticism allows us to mean that in a pretty nice way, I would say in a pretty deep way. And that kind of, it's like our consciousness is a radio dial. And when it's my ego asking for things, I'm dialing it to a certain station I like. That's the stuff that allows the ego to survive and thrive. I just made that up. It's not something I say, but it kind of works. It survive and thrive, right? That's the ego's motto. And so when I'm in mysticism, right, in prayer, going after these certain things I want, they're always going to be things that will allow my ego to survive and thrive. So that's got to go. So as you become apophatic, your radio dial or your choice of items on the menu, it diminishes. If not, just goes away completely. So then you just say, look, I really know I don't know the way. I only want what God wants for me. I only want that. That's all I want. And I'm willing to take the medicine, whatever it is. And frankly, it is often uncomfortable. It is. It isn't always, of course, because the medicine is also joy and love. It is. But, we have to die to ourselves, and we have to see the ugliness in our souls. We have to see the selfishness. We have to see the greed. We have to see the jealousy. We have to see the pride. We have to see that stuff. It has to burn. We have to be willing to sit in that burning and admit that it's true and not defend it or project it. We have to be able to do that. And nowhere do we have to do it so perfectly. Nothing has to be done perfectly, but the place we have to do that best is in prayer. That's where it has to be done best. In prayer, alone in your closet, right, in your secret room, with God, saying, okay, look, this is all true. This is all true. Those people may be wrong too. They often are. They're people. But I am wrong. I am in the wrong. And I need to just accept that and let that be okay. And we have to be able to do that. It's to the degree that we can do that we can heal, because that is our part. We must be willing to see what God is revealing to us. So, Apophaticism, since we don't know what's good for us, since we let go of all these strong opinions about what the path ought to look like, taste like, smell like, feel like, be like, no matter what saint said it, it doesn't matter. None of that is really that relevant once you get to your prayer life with God and say, hey, I don't know the way, show me the way. Then we take what is given, not what we order up on the menu. And Apophaticism allows that to happen because we fundamentally come under this understanding that we don't know the way. So then we're naturally less preferential in our choices because we don't know the way. So once you've accepted that in a deep way, you're very different. Your intuition works differently once you accept that. I mean, people think intuition is this pure faculty that we have, like almost like a direct line to God. This is really not true at all. Intuition serves the will. If you are a Satanist, just take that, some crazy extreme. If you're a Satanist who has satanic goals and designs, whatever those, I don't even know what those are, whatever that might be, your intuition will absolutely serve those goals and designs. It will. And that ought to be enough. If you're a con man or con woman, a grifter, right? Your charisma and intuition will absolutely work to serve those nefarious ends. That ought to be enough for anybody to realize that intuition isn't a golden goose that lays golden eggs all the time. It isn't always true. It isn't always right. It serves the will. So think now, if your intuition serves the will and you gain apophaticism, and you know you don't know the way, and you know you only want to do God's will, whatever that is, now your intuition serves a different master, and your intuition will give you different answers. And that is the way it works. So it's night and day. The person, if a person who has apophaticism feels a cloud of darkness come over them. This is just take it as a metaphor. I'm a mystical type, so I feel these things. It's not really that relevant if you feel it or don't feel it. You could take it as a metaphor also. If you say, well, I don't feel that, then take this, what I feel, as a metaphor for it. So it feels like a cloud, the cloud of unknowing, the great cloud that comes over, and it's filled with infinity, and it's filled with wonder, and it's filled with all the goodness of God, but it is obscured so that you can't see all the specifics. It's all there for you, but you don't know what exactly is what. And there's a great peace in this cloud. You feel surrounded by this cloud of safety and peace because you realize you don't need to know the way. It's not just like, it's also true to say you don't know the way. But once you get this, you realize you don't need to know the way. We have the Good Shepherd, right? The John of the Cross says we have to come in like blind beggars. Like those who are blind beggars, who not only cannot see the way, but who have nothing whatsoever within themselves to take along the journey, to make the journey comfortable, to complete the journey. And this is a great peace that comes over people who get it. It's like, oh, I don't need to know the way. I don't need to figure it out. I can just rest in this. It's going to unfold. If I participate better or worse, I guess it matters a little, but it doesn't matter that much because Christ is doing it. And it is sure. It is going to happen. And people who have it, they don't just believe this blindly like, well, I believe this, and then when I die, it'll all be great. That there's truth in that, but it's like they also can just look back and see that it has happened. So it's a kind of faith that, like faith without works is dead. I mean, I know that really to some degree means you got to do some work, I mean, I get that's what the scripture is saying, but twist it this way for a moment, just to look at it differently. I'm 2 years on the journey. Some remarkable things have happened that I didn't ask for, that I didn't see coming, and that I didn't know existed, and I can look back and see them. Faith without these works that have happened is dead. Right? Not works I did. Works God did. So faith grows. The further you can look back from your starting point with Christ, the more transformation you can see in your life. The wisdom in that transformation, it's really particularly poignant when it changes you in a way you didn't like. And once you get it, you realize you're way better off, but you didn't even want it. It's like you're not making that up, right? It's coming your way. That's the way I like to look at works. That's the way I like to twist that a little bit. Say, faith without works that God has done is dead. But we do need some faith to be on the path long enough for that to happen. So Apophaticism can feel like a cloud that surrounds you. A comforting, semi-dark cloud, a night, a peace that comes around you. That allows you not to need to figure things out. That allows you not to need to understand what is happening. That allows you to trust. And that allows you to remain, and no one does it perfectly, including myself. Nobody does, obviously. But it allows you to be calm in difficult circumstances. I don't mean like if the world falls apart or something. I'm more talking about when your stuff is up and you feel confused and you have issues that are coming up that feel very real in that moment. Apophaticism allows you to be okay with not understanding it and to step back from that and observe, oh yes, this has happened 35 times and all 35 times it has passed. And just gradually I've become a better person all along. So that's the kind of Apophaticism that we're talking about. And yes, it applies to specific ideas about God, but it applies so much to our interaction with the lived spiritual journey through time in life. And it also allows us to just sort of see some things. Now, I don't think everyone I speak to on these videos comes from the New Age movement. I did. I was raised in it, and my first 10 years of practice was, I would say now surrounded by New Age thought. And there's some errors, some profound errors in New Age thought, and one of them, it does not. I'm not saying it's stated explicitly necessarily, but when you meet a lot of New Age people, one thing you see is they're, psychics, tarot cards, crystals. There's this obsession with information, knowing everything, getting ways to get more knowledge. And I like knowledge. I'm not against knowledge at all. I prefer it to be knowledge that's verifiable. They're just muscle testing, or looking into a crystal. But sometimes those things are true too. They work. So, but it's like there's this obsession with knowledge, and I believe that obsession with knowledge mellows out greatly once you realize there's a loving God who wants you to be enlightened, who is willing to guide you there if you'll just follow this loving God. And that is a simple will-based relationship, not a knowledge-based relationship. Tons of wisdom comes by looking back at what it's done. Tons. Every year, more and more. You know a lot about what God does in souls by looking back. A lot. But the person who's 25 years on the journey, looking back, they can see a ton of things that have happened. But looking forwards, they're just as blind as they were the day they started. It is still going forward. It is an apophatic journey. You're looking into a cloud. It's Christmas all the time, but it's Christmas Eve. The presents are there, but they're wrapped. You don't know what's coming, but it's good stuff. Might not be just what you thought you wanted, but it's really nice what you get. That's kind of what it's like. And I think there's probably more. I'll probably do one more video on Apophaticism. We'll call this Apophaticism 2.0. And because I think I might have missed a couple of things, but that's, so think of that though. The symptoms of Apophaticism is a quieter mind, not through discipline, but simply because the soul has decided the mind does not have all of its answers. It just doesn't. And further, it doesn't need to know everything. And so a calm comes and a peace comes with that. Many people say it was a profound and tremendous relief when they got it and realized they just didn't have to figure it all out or know anything. They just didn't even have to know it all. And what a profound relief that is. And I think that allows you to receive God in a more intimate way. I haven't done the videos yet on what it means to receive information from God and the kinds of grains of salt we take all of that with as Christians. And I know a lot of Christians don't take that with a grain of salt, but we're talking about the tradition that comes from the Desert Fathers of the church and the great saints, and the kind of humility that comes from recognizing our mystical experiences are suspect slightly. We're not saying we don't connect with God. We all do. But we just know we don't know. And we know we see in part all the time. And we stress a deep humility on that, on the mystical path. But having said that, we absolutely, when you get the cloud in, since you're not like tuning your radar all the time to get answers, because you've given that up. You've let go of the knob. You don't care. You're not looking at the banquet, spying on all the kinds of feast you want. What do you want to have? You're not running around spending all your time thinking of what shall I get? What shall I do about this? How shall I get this? Here's the feast. You're sitting back in a chair saying, all of this is mine because God has given it all to me. And whatever comes over next, whatever the servant brings next, right? The angel of God or the Holy Spirit brings next, or life brings next. That's the peace I need. That's the peace I want. And the cloud of unknowing allows you to recognize that way more often than you would otherwise. Because there's a whole, God doesn't compete. God's not interested in competition. So it's like it just comes in real quiet and slow and easy. And if that quiet, slow, and easy is surrounded by a need to know and a need to figure out, a need to analyze, and a need to try to psychically understand everything, that noise is profound. It is a profound noise. And when it is gone, you receive a whole bunch of things you wouldn't have received. And maybe the most important is just the quiet and the peace that comes. Just everything's okay. It's not all spinning all the time. And it doesn't need to be spinning all the time. Okay, thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks everyone so much.